Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral services of Dana Elyse Malter Gaughan. Rabbi David Taftil from Illini Chabad will be officiating. For those of you who are in the room, a gentle reminder, please be sure your phones have been turned off.
Family, friends, we gather here today to mourn the painful, sudden, and tragic passing of our dear Dana Elyse Malter Gaughan, Chaya bat Yechiel Michal V'Hadra, who was taken away from us so suddenly and so painfully this past Tuesday afternoon, the 9th day of Mar Cheshvan, October 27th, in the French Polynesia. I know today as we are gathered, we think, Ma Yomar, what could one say? Mi Yomar, who could say? Who could try to understand the pain that we are all feeling? Who could understand the pain of the family and the friends and try to make sense of this day? The truth is that there's truly no words that one could share that could bring true comfort at such a challenging time. But know that everybody is here as a strong unit to support each other and to be here with each other and to strengthen each other now and in the days to come. In Jewish tradition, we know King David wrote the book of Psalms, and by reading and understanding the Psalms, it brings us some sort of comfort in this time. So I'm going to start today's service with the reading of some Psalms. I'll read it in its Hebrew and in its English translation. One of the Psalms is also printed in your paper, which we'll get to in a moment, which we'll say together as well. Psalm 1, which is not in your papers, I'll read it out loud. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzas risha'im, u'v'derech chatoim lo yamad, u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav, ki im b'toras Adonai chefzo, V'sarasa yega yomim v'lola. V'haya ke'et shasal al pagim royim, asher pirio yite be'itoi, v'aleyu lo yibal. V'chol asher ya'asa yatzliach. Le'chein harashoim, ki'im kamotz asher titavenu roach. Al-kein lo yakumu rashoim ba'mishpat, v'chatoram ba'das tzadikim, ki yedei adonai derech tzadikim, v'derech l'shoyim teravot. Happy is the one who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the path of the sinners, nor sat in the company of the scornful. Rather, that one's delight is in the Torah of the Lord, meditating in God's Torah day and night. And will be like a tree planted by the streams of water, that yields its fruit in season, whose leaf would not wither, or whatever one does prosper. Not so the wicked are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked shall not survive judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord loves the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. Psalm 15. Mizmar leDavid Adonai mi yagubar alecha, mi yishkarim b'har kadshecha, herlech tamim u'fayel tzedek, v'dever emes b'lvavai, lo yiragal al yishoinai, lo yasa l'rerei ura, v'chepa lo nasa al forever, nivzeh b'imes nimas v'esirei Adonai yechabit, nishpal laharav lo yomer, kaspa lo nasa v'nesach, v'shoichad al maki lo lakach, a song of David, Lord, who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy mountain? the one who walks in purity, does what is righteous, and speaks the truth from the heart, the one who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor cast disgrace towards a neighbor, in whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of the Lord, who swears truthfully even to personal hurt, and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. I feel like King David met Dana many years ago, and he wrote these Psalms describing what a righteous person is. And we read Psalm 23, which is in your papers that you were given as you walk in. I'll read it in its Hebrew, and then we'll read it together in its translation. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Re'i lo yachzar, B'nois desha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchas yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshev yanchini b'malgit tzedek l'man shemoy, Gam ki elech begetzal mavas le'irara ki ate imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hemi yanachamuni, Tarech lefanei shochan neged zeroi, Ishanta v'shem and reisi kreisi devayi, Achtei v'chesed yedifuni kol mechayai, V'shafti b'veis Adonai l'erech yomim. Please join me as we read. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restored my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord. You know, every Friday night at our Chabad Center, we have a tradition that we speak about King Solomon wrote the Woman of Valor, Ishes Chayil. We always have one volunteer that tells us what is their favorite line. And I was thinking last night, what line in the Eshet Chayil, the Woman of Valor, will describe Dana? And the challenge was, I found in almost every single one word. And our tradition, as we bid farewell to a loved one, think of her qualities. And each and every one of us, I'm sure, have so many stories and so many things that we could share that would explain how she epitomized those ideals. We shared, we're here to remember Dana today as the wife and best friend of Timmy. We're all here to support you. Precious daughter of Amy and Mark, loving sister of Danny and Drew, granddaughter of Renee and Michael, Jane, and of course we know she's together with her dear grandfather now, Marvin Katz. The adored niece of Abby and Mario, David and Tammy, and of course the late Darryl. Cousins of Elliot, Hannah, Jennifer, Frankie, Matthew, Olivia, and Garrett. Daughter-in-law, John and Nancy, and your whole family. Sister-in-law of Aaron and Adam, Patrick and Melissa, and the aunt of James and Lucas are with us as well here today, who I know she loved. Sisters, I saw this in my own eyes for many years on campus, of course. Erica and Anna, Stephanie, Sabrina, Sarah, Chelsea, and Salome. Dana was born just last week, was her birthday on the English calendar, October 25th, and I don't know if many people realize this, but her birthday on the Jewish calendar was just yesterday. So in the week that we celebrated her birthday, which brought us such joy and happiness, God decided that her life has come to a full completion on its mission on this world. But I was thinking about this in the past few days. If I was asked to come up here and say, let's speak about Dana, what would we share? There's so much to talk about. There's so many hours that we could share. And every one of us in this room, which would have 13 times as much had it not been COVID, every one of us has something we could share. So how could we attempt to eulogize such a person? The truth is, it's very hard. But I would attempt to share a few of my reflections from my perspective since I met Dana 13 years ago. I know we'll hear a lot about her life from the perspective of her siblings, dad, father-in-law, and friend. But I'll share something that I have met through my work as director of Chabad at the University of Illinois and a campus rabbi. When Dana was at Chabad, Dana was Chabad. She was the energy, together with Sabrina, Erica, Sarah, and Anna, a quintet of never separation, always coming in, always happy, always smiling. It could be at 1 a.m. eating, pancakes at Chabad, or having a Labor Day barbecue. It could be working with Sabrina to deliver us pallets of Red Bull. Thank you for the Red Bull. Or whatever it was, she was just a force of positivity and a force of energy. As I shared with the family, I've been hearing from many different alumni over the past few days who are shocked and saddened. But I received a text from one alum who shared, I didn't really know Dana well, but whenever I was at Chabad, I was always warmed by her smile. Not only was she active herself, when Drew came to campus, she made sure that I reach out to him without him knowing, to invite him to get involved, wanting him to be involved in Jewish life. I happened to bump into him on the quad doing his baseball table, but little did he know Dana wanted me to make sure that happened. I can tell you that now. As Rabbi Eitan from Shir Chadash shared with me, Dana was a beautiful dancer. You recall she was dancing the dance group at holiday celebration when she was younger, bringing such positive energy, always bringing joy. She was always celebrating. Such a dedicated daughter. As I hear from Amy and Mark, the star of their eyes, the princess. And to see how Danny describes his relationship with Dana, and to hear it firsthand with Drew and seeing it on the years on campus. She was a sister to lean on and an ear to speak to. She was so many things to so many people. And her impact is very great, and we could see that by the fact that had it not been COVID restrictions today, we would have to rent a stadium to remember her, with the amount of people that wanted to be here. Communities across the United States and across the world came together to reflect and to bring her back home. We do find ourselves in very interesting times. So many people are joining over Zoom. We're not here in person. But I want to tell you that at times like these, it's when we have to come together. The times of struggle and in pain. The times of hardship that we're all here to celebrate a life and to strengthen one another. We know that Dana will live on. We know that everything she did will live on. The family commits to keep her going. Us at Elyse Chabad in Champaign, we commit to keep her going. And we know, Dana, that everything that you have stood for and continue to stand for will be felt for many years. The biggest question that many of us are feeling here today is why. If I could encapsulate today, it's 3 letters. It's why, W-H-Y. Why? Why are we here on a Tuesday morning in a year that we're supposed to plan celebration sitting at a funeral? Why are we going through this struggle and this challenge today? In our tradition, when we are faced with questions, we look to the guidance of the Torah. And in the Torah, we find the story of Moses and Aaron. Aaron lost his 2 sons suddenly at a young age. Moses came to Aaron and told Aaron, God takes those that are near and dear. It says Aaron was silent. And the rabbis ask, why was Aaron silent? It says, because Aaron was looking for excuses. I don't want to hear God takes those that are near and dear. I don't want to hear any of that. I want to know why God, why did you do this to me? And it's a space to ask, and it's okay to ask. It's okay to wonder and try to understand, why does this happen? And traditionally, actually, we find that we say the Kaddish. And if you look at the words of the Kaddish, one of the things you would notice is that it doesn't mention anything about death and about dying. So why is it that we say the Kaddish? And the reason is because even though we don't know what happens and why it happens, we trust that God has a reason for everybody. And I want to share with you, as I shared with the family a moment ago, that life in this world is like a caterpillar. We're crawling on the ground. And a caterpillar eventually goes into a cocoon and comes out as a butterfly. The butterfly and the caterpillar are the same thing. It's just another expression of the same thing. A person on this world is our caterpillar. When someone passes away, they're a butterfly. Dana lives on. She will live on. Her soul lives on. And she'll live on through each and every one of us doing what we can to perpetuate her memory. Death in Judaism is not the end of life, but a culmination of one's accomplishments in life. As King David writes in Psalms, "Do not fear when a man grows rich, when the glory of his house is increased. For when he dies, he will take nothing. His glory will not descend after him. For he alone praised himself in his lifetime, but all will praise you if you better yourself." Although Dana won't be here with us in a physical sense, her legacy of love and friendship will always be remembered. The best thing every one of us in this room could do, and every one of us on Zoom could do, is to think, what could we take a personal resolution to continue Dana in my life every single day? A resolution of love and kindness, a resolution of doing a mitzvah, a good deed. May her memory be for a blessing, and may she be, as we say in Yiddish, a gute better. She should be up in heaven, a good beseecher, to beseech on high for the well-being and health and safety of a dear family who will need all the blessings they could get. And I know she will be up there, as we saw in the past few days. She's getting things done for us from on high. May she be a gute better and continue doing things for you, Timmy, for the whole family, for blessing, for health, and for happiness. We're going to hear some thoughts from family and friends. First going to call a good friend of Dana and Timmy, Jason, come up and share a few words. Shared in private. I want to ask the father-in-law, John, come up and say a few words. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here today. When I think of Dana, which is often, one word comes to mind: pure joy. Oops, that's two words. Joy. Dana's entry into our life was a blessing, and that blessing provided us with joy. And the best of all was the love that her and Timmy shared. Always so obvious. The rabbi said we're caterpillars, and when we pass, but we turn to a butterfly. I agree, but she was a butterfly her whole life. Whenever she walked into a room, she always lit it up. And we love Dana. And that love doesn't have a D on it. It's not loved. She will always be in our hearts and always loved. She was always so gracious. I remember her affection for our grandsons, James and Lucas. We'd get together at parties and the adults would be talking and the boys would be vying for her attention. And the name that stuck with us from James' pronunciation, trying to get her attention, Dana! Dana! And that's how we remember her in our hearts. We love her, again, from the entire Gaughan family. Thank you so much for your love, your affection, and support. Thank you.
Aunt Abby.
I'm pulling strength from Dana right now. There are no words to describe this feeling of loss, and no words that will do justice to Dana. My only hope is to offer you some comfort and peace. Dana was adventurous, free-spirited, and loving. She was so excitable, refreshing, and so appreciative. She found joy in the smallest things. She was so comfortable in her own skin. Dana was a role model to everyone she met, and I aspired to be like her. There are so many memories I will cherish and keep close to my heart. If you ask my daughters, they would tell you that Dana was my favorite child. She was truly like a daughter to me, but different, so different. There are no words to describe what Dana was to me. Our relationship was truly so unique. We confided in one another. We never judged. We were never disappointed. We always just had an unspoken understanding of each other. Our relationship was so easy. And I looked forward to talking to her because every conversation was just effortless and the topics were endless. In moments like this, when things are so tough, I wish I could call her. And while it pains me to know that I can't, I find solace in remembering the positive perspective she put into every conversation we had. If you know Dana, you know she danced her way into every room, twirling in her Free People maxi dresses and fry boots. She was a constant ray of sunshine. Our lives are changed forever. We are experiencing an aching pain that will remain inside of us for as long as we live. For now, we will mourn, but moving forward, we owe it to Dana to live our lives to the fullest. We will never understand why such a remarkable person like Dana was taken from us so soon. We must stop dwelling on the why and focus on how to live more like Dana. To me, I know how much Dana loved you. And she loves sharing her life with you. You will always be family, and we will always be there for you. Amy and Mark, you raised a beautiful woman. You should be so proud of her. You never held her back from living the life she was meant to live. Although you worried about all her adventures, you supported her and provided her with the life skills she needed to be the free spirit she was. I know how much Dana loved you. Danny and Andrew, as her brothers, you have also been blessed with that light inside you. I hope you will find peace in knowing that Dana will always be a part of you. You are now given an amazing opportunity to honor Dana with that light and continue to make it shine. always believed that things happen for a reason. Although I'm having difficulty believing in that now, it is important to accept that it's okay to not understand. The most important thing is for all of us to carry Dana's light within us. It is our responsibility now to love deeper, to be present with one another, to appreciate more, and to find joy in all the small things. In these past few days, I've seen and felt an overwhelming amount of love and support. Please find comfort in knowing Dana's spirit lives on within you. Dana truly was a princess and will continue to inspire us to live a full and happy life. I love you, Dana. I love you.
Anyone who knows Dana knows that she was living the life that she wanted. She married her perfect man, mine and Danny's perfect brother-in-law. She lived in her perfect apartment in the perfect location, blocked from the Pacific Ocean. Dana and Timmy would go to countless Fish concerts. She traveled to so many beautiful countries around the world. She was a badass gymnast in her childhood and a snowboarder in adulthood. And she spent her free time making creative snacks and walking down the beaches of Los Angeles, wearing a winter coat. Dana knew that moving out to this perfect life would mean a trade-off of being long distance from her family and friends. So she called everyone back to Chicago every single day of her life, making the miles between us mean nothing. I lived under the same roof as Dana for about 16 years. I lived 20 miles from her for another 3, but I've never been as close to her as I was in the past 7. She guided me through my first adult years. She was always my first call when I was in trouble with my parents. She knew a thing or two about being in trouble with her parents. But she was also my first call when things in my life were great, when I needed advice after meeting Julie, which was as simple as, just try to be cool, monkey. Even though you're a dork, just try to be cool. And I'm thinking, I'm in college and my big sister is still calling me monkey and I'm the dork. But anyways, Dana was my first call back to share the good news that her advice worked. And while I was calling her for these big moments in my life, she was calling me on just another Wednesday morning to see what I had for dinner last night. And she always knew the answer was tacos. So she'd follow with her expert recommendations on how to make them better for next time. I promise I did not take these calls for granted either. I was fully aware of my blessing to have this amazing person as my sister, and it was always so great talking to her, but it was even better seeing her. She'd come home several times every year, and I'd go visit her in Redondo Beach as much as I could. So one year for Julie's birthday, I got her flights to LA because what better birthday gift can you give to someone than to hang out with Dana for a weekend? And that turned out to be the weekend we both fell in love with Dana's lifestyle. From LAX, straight to In-N-Out Burger, to the beach, to the mountains, to the best restaurants and concerts that weekend. It's safe to say Dana and Timmy showed us a great time. But who are we kidding? You can't not have a great time with Dana. She doesn't ever just sit there. She's blasting music, she's dancing, and she magically injects you with energy that you didn't know you had. Despite all the jokes about how her Malter men were math and analytics geeks, she reminded us continuously that she was amazingly proud of who Danny and I became as young men. not just by telling us, but because she was our #1 fan. She bragged to all her friends about her brothers. She connected us with anyone she knew that could help and support us. She didn't do this because she had to, she didn't have to. And she didn't do it because she even understood what we were doing, she did it. She did this because she knew that if we spent time on something, it was important to us. And if it was important to us, then it was important to her. And that's the beautiful woman that Mark and Amy raised. The day after we lost Dana, I was thinking about how in most heartbreaks, there's generally at least something positive to cling on to, some type of hope, something that will give yourself motivation to get yourself through the pain, even if small. But with Dana's passing, I honestly couldn't even dream up an image of what that hope might look like, just emptiness. It didn't seem to exist. Over the next few days, a course of events happened that gave us hope. And this is the story that I've given the title, The Princess of French Polynesia. As the rabbi mentioned, back when Dana was in college at U of I, she frequently visited the Chabad with her friends, Erica, Anna, Sabrina, Sarah, and Aaron. Whether she went for the free wine and matzo ball soup or just her love of Judaism, we're not sure. Maybe a bit of both. But the important thing is that she loved going there and built a great relationship with Rabbi David. I'm 6 years younger than Dana and followed her footsteps to U of I. And as he mentioned, when I first met him that day at Quad Day, I introduced myself, Drew Malter. He immediately knew that meant I was Dana's brother. He mentioned that Dana had reached out to him and let him know that her baby brother was coming to U of I and asked him to look out for me without telling me. Rabbi David went on to tell me about how Dana was the center of the Chabad every time. She lit up every room she was in, and he was so happy to hear from me that she was still best friends with the same girls. So having known about the rabbi's amazing relationship with Dana and her friends, we had reached out to him last week to let him know the tragic news. Just hoping it would help us to have a religious leader that Dana and her friends and I looked up to guide us through this difficult time. But Rabbi David has not only guided us, he knew how special Dana was, and he wanted to do much more. Getting Dana home to Chicago was a complicated task. It was international paperwork and flight logistics. So Rabbi David reached out to the synagogue in Tahiti. Yes, it was also news to me that there's a synagogue in Tahiti. They're an Orthodox synagogue, and they're loved by their fellow islanders. Rabbi David told them that Dana was an incredibly important person to so many of us back in the States, and that it's very, very important that she is returned home to Chicago as soon as possible and treated with grace and dignity. From the moment they spoke, the Tahiti synagogue took matters into their own hands and treated Dana like a princess. They dedicated their Shabbat service to her, prayed for her and for Timmy and the rest of our family. They sought to it that she was protected and treated with complete respect. They had someone stay by her side and guard her every second of every day from then until now. They even reached out to the president of French Polynesia to let him know they've lost a member of their family and that she needs to be returned home as soon as possible. The synagogue and the president, they pulled strings, they moved mountains to dodge the roadblocks so that Dana could be on the next possible flight home. The president did this because, in his own words, Dana is like a sister to us as we are a family. The synagogue in Tahiti mentioned that all of the gates opened up for Dana in ways that seemed impossible. Hundreds of French Polynesian people, maybe a few thousand even, who learned of the passing of such a beautiful and loved young woman, have reached out to my family over social media to let us know how devastated and heartbroken they are for our loss. An employee at the hotel where Timmy and Dana stayed reached out to tell us that the entire place lit up the moment they walked in the building. Between the synagogue, the French Polynesian government, and their amazing people, our family does find comfort in knowing that there has been so much love sent to us from across the world. We are in awe at how Dana was blessed and honored in ways that are unimaginable. We can't thank Rabbi David enough for making this happen just by reaching out, and the synagogue in Tahiti, who simply did this because they saw Dana as a part of their family too. Then there's Dana's best friends, who are doers, who will never take no for an answer to make sure that Dana's life can be honored in the best light. Although this still leaves us with a permanent giant hole through our hearts, I've learned from this story that among the worst tragedy we will ever experience in our lives, there actually is something to be hopeful for. That Dana not being physically with us does not mean that Dana will not physically impact our lives in every way that she already has. I promise you all that Dana loved her life. I guarantee that if Dana could tell us right now, she would say she lived the absolute best life of any human being to ever live. And she left us with her recipe. Every person here or listening, myself included, has the recipe to live like Dana. To live the best lives that we can live, to be forever happy amongst the sharp pain that will never go away. And I'll leave with this. I too have been struggling all week with the question about, does everything happen for a reason? Some days I'll believe it, and the next I'll wake up thinking it's just a BS feel-good expression. So here's where I'm at today. Things can happen for a reason only if you decide to make a reason out of it. We all owe it to Dana to make a reason out of her life and death. This means loving each other, supporting each other, staying connected, and to continue living our lives like Dana. Thank you. I'll pass it off to my brother Danny now.
Friends and family, to those who have flown in from around the world, people watching throughout the country online and as far as Maria, the Tahitian people that have been absolutely amazing, and all of those who are local, thank you so much for being here. For those that I haven't met, I'm lucky enough to call myself Dana's brother. Dana, I've never told you in person, but I looked up to you and you were a role model to me. You were the cool, pretty, athletic older sister that any younger brother dreams of having. I was fortunate to overlap 2 years of high school with Dana. It seemed like everybody at Glenbrook North knew me as Dana's younger brother. We drove to school every day together in the Jeep Liberty, typically running late, speeding down Shermer Road, parking in the last open spot down by the baseball or soccer fields. But walking into school with you was amazing because everyone treated me like royalty as your younger brother. After all, and as we just heard from Drew, we learned these past few days that you still continue to be treated like royalty from the Tahitian people. We all know that Dana loved to travel, seeing many parts of the world, but she also helped me to push myself outside my comfort zone. Instead of going on a college graduation trip to Florida, Dana convinced me to go backpacking in Southeast Asia. A few years prior, Dana and Erica had traveled for 3 months to India, Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos, all with nothing more than a backpack and clothes. Dana fell in love with India, and I know that trip played a large part of who Dana became in her later years. India is a vibrant, spiritual place, and that is one of the best ways I can think of to describe Dana. This past week, we have learned that life can be short, but if there's one thing that I will carry on with me, it is that Dana taught me the most important things are about how you live your life. For Dana, that meant exploring and getting outside of your comfort zone. Because of the encouragement from Dana, I did decide to skip that trip to Florida, and I bought a ticket to Bangkok instead. I wish to continue to emulate that philosophy for the rest of my life. Dana loved to dance, she loved to be free, she loved to be outdoors, and she loved the life that was given to her. I will miss the family vacations we had together, taking an Alaskan cruise, horseback riding through Colorado, sitting in the back of a car on a road trip listening to her blast music through her Walkman headphones. I will miss the gymnastics meets where I probably missed your beam routine because I was playing Game Boy. And I will miss going out to Los Angeles to visit you. You took me to your favorite Mexican restaurant. I miss eating there. I will miss you tying me up to put makeup on me as a kid. I will miss watching movies with you. I would think I was the only boy under 12 to have the whole movie center stage memorized word for word. Advice didn't only come from travel, it came in the forms of life and relationships as well. When I started dating Natalie, I ran everything by Dana. When it came time to birthday or holiday gifts for Natalie, I'd FaceTime Dana and ask, Dana, do you think Natalie will like this? She'd immediately run through about 100 other things Natalie might like, and all of them would always be spot on. Natalie, birthday gifts will continue, but I will miss calling Dana first to get her approval. Some of these recommendations came in the form of clothing from Free People. For those that don't know Natalie too well, we have to stop into Free People every Saturday to see if there's new clothes in the store. Because I've been in the store so much, I know every article of clothing and how overpriced they are. And if you didn't know this about Dana, Dana loved Free People. One night, Natalie and I are FaceTiming with Dana. We're in our usual spot on the couch. Dana typically either side by side with Timmy or in the kitchen cooking together. But this particular night, we caught Dana alone, and I saw her wearing a t-shirt with a 70s rock band. I can't recall which one, but it was maybe Grateful Dead or the Rolling Stones. I say out loud, wait a second, I know that shirt. That's a $100 t-shirt from Free People. Dana turns her head to see if Timmy was around. She looks back at me and goes, shh. Asking Dana for advice was natural to me, not just because she was my older sister, but also because of how much she cared for and loved Timmy. This was one of the most obvious things in the world, if you ever were blessed to have the opportunity of being with the two of them. All you had to do was see the way that Dana looked into Timmy's eyes. Their passion and love for each other is something that I looked up to. I was scrolling through some pictures the other day that Dana had posted to find some of her exact words. I stopped on an image of Timmy sitting on a paddleboard on the crystal clear water of Lake Tahoe. And the caption read, I've spent the best days of my life with you. I stopped on this image because as we reflect on Dana's life wasn't only about Dana. It was about the people around her and how Dana made each one of them better. Whether it was chaperoning a girls' trip with our cousin Hannah and her friends to Naples, sharing wisdom about life to Frankie, acting as an inspiration to Olivia, spoiling Erica's and partly Dana's daughter Sloan with clothes and toys, holding hands through life with Anna, traveling the world with Sabrina and Idan, bragging all the time to our family about how talented Sarah is making a Jeep commercial, showing what true friendship is with Stephanie, playing with Aaron's dogs, bumming on the beach with Chelsea as Timmy and Jason bro out, being a beautiful, fun, loving daughter to our parents, the best big sister a brother can ask for to Drew and myself, and finally, but most importantly, she gave everything she had to make sure Timmy was always happy, always. Timmy, Drew and I will forever call you our brother. Speaking on behalf of my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of the wonderful friends here, Dana, we love you and miss you and will always strive to live like Dana. Thank you, and now my dad will share some words.
I'm planning on giving you all a mini biography of Dana's life and to tell you about all the accomplishments and all the things that she did throughout her life to make Amy and me so proud. Dana was a beautiful bundle of energy from the day she was born. From early childhood, we could see that she had a passion for and worked hard to be great at everything she did. Her first major endeavor of greatness was gymnastics. From the day basically that she took her first steps as a 1-year-old or 2-year-old, Amy was teaching her to do cartwheels and quickly enrolled her in her first gymnastics club, probably at about the age of 5, where she continued to compete until the age of 14. During these gymnastics years, Dana learned the importance of discipline and hard work. She practiced for 3 hours every night, but she knew we would never let her go to the gym unless she first completed all of her homework. So she would come home from school and spend a couple of hours at the kitchen table, always completing her assignments, and I don't think she ever missed a night at the gym. This taught her great structure and discipline, which would go on to be 2 of her greatest attributes that she later brought to her job as an adult, which I'll get to in a few moments. During the gymnastics season, it was just a pleasure. We loved watching Dana compete at her meets. She was so talented. And we were so proud to see her on the occasions where she made it onto the awards podium, which was pretty much at every meet. Dana always found a way to be different and original. That's a trait that she got from her mother, Amy. And she always wanted to be her own person. Amy used to tell Dana not to be afraid to be different, not only to not be afraid to be different, but instead, what you should be afraid of is to be afraid to be the same as everybody else. That was how both of my girls lived. One year, while choreographing Dana's floor exercise routine, in order to be different, she and Amy decided that most of the girls all used the same boring classical music. So we decided to spice it up a bit, and I recorded a 90-second version of Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. Dana loved and green-lighted the song, so she and Amy went on to make the dance routine. Out of that music. Now, at all of Dana's meets, when her music would come on after all the classical music from all the other girls, the judges' heads would pop up as they finally heard a song that they actually liked. I was convinced that because she danced to cool music, it probably helped increase her score at least a little bit. After a couple of years, we changed her music to the Yes song, another of my favorite bands, which became one of Dana's at the time, Mood for a Day, which the judges again seemed to love. And to this day, every time one of those 2 songs comes on my car radio, I call Dana. And I just hold my phone to the car speaker for her to listen. She always loved that. That was a bond that we had together, those 2 songs. Gymnastics turned out to not be Dana's only sport, and soon Danny and Drew would not be my only 2 baseball players. One spring when Dana was 16, 2 friends of mine who ran the Northbrook T-Ball League asked me if Dana would be interested in pitching to the 5-year-old girls that summer. I told them they had the wrong Malter kid because Dana didn't know much about or even like baseball. They laughed at me and said, all she's got to do is underhand the ball and aim for the bats. And she didn't need to know the rules because when the girls run to first base, they're always safe. They're 5 years old. I told them, okay, go ahead and ask her, assuming she wouldn't be interested. But she not only said yes, she wound up pitching and loving it for 2 summers. I would often come to the games to watch Dana pitch, and I always thought it was so funny. So often when the little girls would hit the ball, instead of running to first base, they would run to the pitcher's mound and hug Dana's leg. Excuse me. Okay. Whenever she just loved little kids, and little kids just loved Dana. Whenever she came to watch her brother's baseball games, she never really watched the games. The little sisters would either be in Dana's lap, or she would be teaching them either to dance or to do a back handspring. The other parents loved Dana too. They loved seeing their small kids play with Dana. So many of them would tell Amy and me how beautiful Dana was, both on the inside and both on the outside, but even more importantly on the inside. Gymnastics can be a brutal sport, and there are many injuries. And Dana was not able to escape that fate. In 8th grade, she hurt her back, and so had to put a temporary halt to her career. But that never stopped her from having fun. She danced around our house pretty much every waking minute, while she was watching TV or listening to music, or as Danny mentioned, watching her favorite movie of all time, what's it called, Dan? Center Stage. Danny mentioned that he knew every word. I even knew every word. She must have watched that movie 100 times. Well, anyways, she channeled that dancing energy into the Orchesis Club and Palms Squad at GVN. I never could have imagined this previously, but I loved watching Dana dancing in those Orchesis shows as much as I loved watching the boys play baseball. By the time of her senior year, her back was feeling well enough to get back into gymnastics, and she became one of the stars of the high school team and helped the team win a conference championship. In Dana's college years, her back hurting again, but ever being a positive spirit, Dana soon would turn lemons into lemonade. She had first majored in graphic design and then advertising, but didn't love either of them. One summer, she was receiving back treatments at a clinic downtown, and she befriended her 2 physical therapists, who convinced her that she was perfectly suited for a career in the medical field. So Dana changed her major to kinesiology, and not long after graduation, she had been exploring all of her possibilities when she came across a program in Colorado that would train her to be a medical sales rep. But never wanting to take the easy road, Dana studied the most difficult program of spinal surgical sales, which she passionately turned into her career. Dana was soon thereafter hired by Medicor, where she learned to prep an operating room for spinal surgeries and to work with and assist the surgeons. She loved and was so proud of her work. One day, Amy and I were visiting her in California, and I was riding in the passenger seat of Dana's car as she was taking me to lunch. Her phone rang, and she answered it on the speakerphone so I could hear the entire conversation. Excuse me. There was a doctor on the other end of the line who began talking to Dana about a surgical case they'd be performing the next day. They were talking in a foreign language to me about the spine and vertebrae, but Dana, of course, understood every word and was perfectly able to converse with the surgeon. Then the doctor told Dana that he wanted a vertebral cage of a certain shape. A vertebral cage is a device that comes in several shapes and sizes and is used to fuse 2 vertebrae together. Dana thought for a moment and told the doctor that after viewing the x-rays, she thought that for this particular patient, they should use a different type of cage, one with a larger angle. I thought that the doctor would be angry. After all, he's the medical expert and would probably only want Dana to bring the exact device that he asked for. But after a long pause, his voice came back on the speaker. "Wow, Dana, that's actually a great idea. Thank you. Let's go with that one." I was so proud to hear that conversation and see not only firsthand how smart Dana was, but that she had such confidence in herself, such confidence to advise a veteran orthopedic surgeon. Hearing that conversation was honestly the proudest moment of my life. But that night she did something else to make us proud. We took Dana and Timmy to an expensive restaurant for dinner. After the meal, Dana got up and said she was going to the ladies' room. But that was a lie, as I would soon learn. Shortly after she returned to the table, I asked the waiter for the check, but he told me that Dana had already paid it. She looked at me with her beautiful smile and said, "Daddy, I could afford it now. I want to treat you guys." Again, I was so proud because when she had left for LA just a few years ago, she had only about $300 in her bank account. And now she had worked so hard and accomplished so much and gained so much success that she was paying for a $300 dinner. I knew she had made it. Back to Dana's career. Last night, we all had the pleasure of meeting Dana's two bosses, Greg and Steve, and also Dr. Justin Millard, an orthopedic surgeon with whom Dana not only worked, but learned a great deal from and became close friends with Justin and his girlfriend Laura, who is also here with us today. Thank you all for flying in to remember Dana with us. We greatly appreciate it and every story you told us. As a young girl, every time Amy and I went to parent-teacher conferences, there was one common denominator with all of Dana's teachers. She was curious and inquisitive. Dana was a hand raiser. If she didn't understand a concept, she was never too shy to ask for more explanation, and she wouldn't quit until she understood. She also asked why a lot, so she could understand different points of view before drawing her own opinions. Well, Greg, Steve, and Justin told us some stories last night that we are grateful to know. In fact, that same curiosity and thirst for knowledge from her childhood is what led Dana to achieve such great success in her career. Justin told us that he met Dana at a conference that she wasn't even supposed to be at. It was only for doctors and reps from certain sponsoring firms, but somehow Dana got herself in. As her friends would know, Dana always did get her way. If she wanted something, nobody could keep her out. Justin wondered, who is this girl? She doesn't belong here. But when they talked, they immediately struck up a professional relationship. He went home and told his girlfriend that he met a girl who is incredibly smart and loves her work, and that he was going to start using Dana as his device representative. Laura at first was skeptical. Who could blame her? But once she met Dana, she knew that Justin was right about her. The four of them, Dana, Timmy, Justin, and Laura, went on to be close friends. Justin also told us how Dana would follow him around at his clinics and examine x-rays and MRIs with him, always asking why to learn more. She was so inquisitive. She didn't want to be just a, quote, medical device sales rep. Dana wanted to learn to think like a doctor. One more story Justin told us was about a new technology that Dana turned him onto. Yes, that's correct. Dana gave medical advice to a surgeon. It was a new technology Dana had read about that improves the success rate of spinal fusions. The two of them were at a conference when Dana convinced Dr. Millard to learn about it. What is it? You're going to have to ask Justin later today. He took Dana's advice, and today he and most other orthopedic surgeons use this technology that he first learned about from Dana. These stories make us so proud. Greg and Steve told us similar stories last night. They hired Dana 6 years ago as a young girl who knew very little about their field, but they took a chance on her because they saw potential. After about a year, Dana tried to quit her job, not because of money, but because she felt she wasn't learning fast enough from them. But they saw so much potential in Dana, and she knew that she was so they knew that she provided so much value to them, and they wouldn't accept Dana's resignation. Instead, they did what she wanted. They put her on an accelerated learning curve. They had never before seen somebody with such desire to learn, so they hadn't really planned for it. And over the years, learned Dana did. She quickly became an expert in everything related to spinal surgery, to the point that they no longer had to worry about any surgical cases that Dana was in charge of because they knew she would handle it like a pro. Last night, they showed us an email that Dana wrote only a couple of weeks ago before she left on her honeymoon. It was about the cases that they would be covering for her while she was in Tahiti. It was several pages long in medical language that I couldn't understand, with every detail that they needed to know about the cases. One more Dana Medicor story. A few years ago, Greg and Steve decided to lease Dana a new car and asked her what she wanted. She said she wanted a Subaru. They said, "Are you sure? We'll get you whatever you want." Nope, she said, she just wanted a Subaru. That was Dana. She didn't need anything expensive to show off. She was always content with simplicity. Technically, Dana was an independent contractor, so recently she formed an LLC, which she called Malter Medical. After forming the company, she texted our whole family a picture of the first check made out to her new entity. And I honestly don't know if she was more proud to share the check with us, or if we were more proud to see all that she had accomplished. Amy and I always encouraged Dana to keep digging for what she was great at and loved. Well, she found that passion in spinal surgery, and she was just so incredibly smart and ambitious. Thank you all from California for sharing those stories with us because they made us so proud. Now to the love of her life and best friend, Timmy. 7 years ago, Dana and Timmy met at a Fish concert. She told us that she had fallen in love with a boy from Buffalo Grove, but who now lived in California. Amy and I joked that of all the local boys Dana could find, she had to find one that lived 2,000 miles away. But once we met Timmy and saw the way he looked at her, and she at him, we knew that their love was worth every one of those miles. They had a long-distance relationship for a year or so, with lots of trips to LA. Dana had no money, so Timmy was always sending her the tickets. And then Dana permanently moved out there a year later. At first, she took jobs as a waitress and as a nanny before landing her dream job at Medicor. Dana and Timmy loved and enjoyed life more than any couple I've ever known. They traveled all over the world and spent countless weekends hiking in national parks. They also lived only a block from the Pacific Ocean, so they spent many hours and nights walking or riding bikes on the beach. Timmy, Dana called us so often to let us know how much she loved you and to let us know that you always treated her like your princess. She often beamed with pride for you as she told us about your job and all of your career success. She was so proud of you, Timmy. The best part of my day was always when Dana would call me. Almost every afternoon, my phone would ring as Dana was probably driving home from a hospital. The conversation always began with, "Hi, Dane." "Hi, Daddy." And then she would tell me about her weekend plans with Timmy, where they would be traveling to next, or about the surgical case she might have participated in that day, or even about politics or my economic viewpoint on some government policy. If it was about a surgery, she would tell me about the miracles that the doctors performed to help a patient live with less pain. And her scrubs, she would, with every minute detail of the procedures. She was also so proud to text us pictures of herself dressed up in her scrubs and to tell us about the surgeries she participated in. She loved talking to both of us, but not necessarily at the same time. Often I would hear Amy talking to Dana either right before or after I talked to her, and hearing the same conversation and the same things that Dana and I would talk about. We realized that was because she loved her alone time with each of us. The happiest day for Amy and me was one day in the spring of last year. Timmy texted me asking if he could call me that night. We, of course, knew what that meant and waited with anticipation all day. When Tim called, he first made some small talk, nervously asking me how my day was and what we had for dinner. I waited patiently for him to get to the point. He then told me that he loves Dana more than anything in the world, and he wanted to marry her and asked for my blessing. Amy, of course, was filled with tears of joy and wanted to celebrate with them. So we hopped on a plane and flew out to LA. We hopped on a plane and flew out to LA, but I asked Timmy not to tell Dana we were coming because we wanted to surprise her. We planned with Timmy to all meet at a nice restaurant in Manhattan Beach on Monday night after the two of them, had a wonderful weekend alone to celebrate. Dana FaceTimed Amy much throughout the weekend to share Timmy's engagement surprises, thinking we were in Northbrook. She didn't know we were in a hotel just a few miles away, and at one point, Dana asked Amy where we were because she saw strange curtains in the background. I thought quickly on my feet and told her we had taken a weekend trip to Michigan. Then on Monday afternoon, Dana FaceTimed Amy again, this time for about 90 minutes, as we were sitting in our hotel room, to tell Amy about the restaurant she and Timmy were going to that night to wrap up the best weekend of her life. And of course, to show Amy the ring for the 100th time. She kept saying how excited she would be to come home soon and show us the ring. I honestly don't know how Amy was able to keep a straight face, knowing that we'd be seeing her in a few hours at that very restaurant. When Dana arrived at the restaurant and saw us, she jumped into our arms and squeezed us, looking like the happiest person in the world that Timmy had made out of her. Timmy, we love you very much, and although your marriage was cut short, you will forever be our family, our son, and our brother. Dana was our hippie girl who taught us all how to live a life of pure joy, including me. I'm supposed to be her teacher, but she was actually my teacher just as much. She had the passion to love everyone she met and to love life every day, to love every day of her life. We are still feeling her love through the outpouring of support and prayers we have been receiving for the past week from so many friends and loved ones and relatives. Dana, Mom and I will forever miss you. Mom and I will forever miss you, and we'll be thinking of and loving you with every breath we take for the rest of our lives. But knowing that you lived your life in the best way possible will at least give us some solace. Finally, her best friends came up with these slogans: dance like Dana, flip like Dana, laugh like Dana, love like Dana, and finally, live like Dana. Thank you.
Sure that in the days, weeks, and times to come, we continue to learn the impact of Dana on so many. God should give all the strength to the entire family, Timmy, Mark, and Amy, Drew, Danny, and Drew, Timmy, your whole family, extended family and friends. I'm going to conclude today's service with a prayer that as Dana is on this journey, prayer of Kel Malei Rachamim, that God should accept the soul of Dana and bless her and bring her to peace, Gan Eden and paradise. And at the same time, bring strength and blessing to all the family and friends as well. We'll read the prayer in Hebrew following that in English. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim, Shechein b'amreimim hamzei menucha nechoina al kanfei hashechina b'malois kedoshim utahorim k'ze'ar harakim hazirim es nishmat chaya bat Yechia Michal v'hadra shachal le'olama Aver she'anachnu mispalim ad askash nishmasa Began Eden tehei menuchasa lachem al arachim yesterday v'sisa knafaf lo'elamim v'yitzor v'tzor chaim es nishmasa Adonai unachalasa v'senocha v'shalom v'shkava v'nomar Amen. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant proper repose on the sheltering wings of your presence, the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness in the firmament of the soul of Chaya, the daughter of Yechia Michal and Hadra, Dana Elyse Malter Gaughan, who has gone to her world, and for whose memory we pray. May her repose be in paradise. May the Master of Compassion bring her under the cover of God's wings and bind her soul in the bond of life. May the Lord be her heritage, and may repose on her resting place in peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, information about Shiva, the memorial contributions to Elyse Chabad, or the synagogue in Tahiti, or the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, all that information is on your service folder. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to rise and stand in place as the family members in the first row escort Dana's casket to the hearse. I'm going to respectfully request everyone else just remain in the room for a few moments. Please rise.